Good day, everyone. So, allow me to introduce myself first. I am Rikami Jane Dihito, discussing to you a short story titled The Footnote to Youth. And this is written by Jose Garcia Villa. So, first, let's have the author's biography. So, everyone, this is Jose Garcia Villa, and he is a National Artist for Literature, 1973. August 5, 1908, February 7, 1997. So, Jose Garcia Villa was a Filipino poet, literary critic, short story writer, and painter. He was awarded the National Artist of the Philippines title for literature in 1973, as well as the Guggenheim Fellowship in Creative Writing by Conrad Aiken. He is known to have introduced the reversed consonants rhyme scheme in writing poetry, as well as the extensive use of punctuation marks, especially commas, which have him known as the comma poet. He used the pen name Daviglion and derived from dove, eagle, lion, based on the characters he derived from himself. These animals were also explored by another poet, E. Cummings in Daviglion, Adventures in Value, a poem dedicated to Villa. So let's proceed to his early life. So, Jose Villa was born on August 5, 1908 in Manila's Singalong district. His parents were Simeon Villa, a personal physician of Emilio Aguinaldo, the founding president of the First Philippine Republic, and Gia Garcia, a wealthy landowner. He graduated from the University of the Philippines Integrated School and the University of the Philippines High School in 1925. Villa enrolled on a pre-medical course in the University of the Philippines, but then switched to pre-law course. However, he realized that his true passion was in the arts. A short biography prepared by the Foreign Service Institute said Villa was first interested in painting but turned to writing after reading Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio. And so in his writing career, meanwhile, he devoted a good part of his time writing short stories and poems. Soon, he started exerting his leadership among the UP writers. In 1929, he published Man Songs, a series of erotic poems which the administrators in UP found too bold and was even fined Philippine peso for obscenity by the Manila Court of First Instance. In that same year, Villa won Best Story of the Year from Philippine Free Press magazine for Mir Ay Nisa. He also received 1,000 prize money which he used to migrate to the United States. And he enrolled at the University of New Mexico, wherein he was one of the founders of Clay, a mimeograph literary magazine. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree and pursued postgraduate work at Columbia University. And Villa had gradually caught the attention of the country's literary circles, one of the few Asians to do so at that time. He introduced a new rhyming scheme called reversed consonants, wherein, according to Villa, the last sounded consonants of the last syllable or the last principal consonant of a word are reversed for the corresponding rhyme. Thus, a rhyme for near would be run or rain, green, rain. In 1949, Villa presented a poetic style he called comma poems, wherein commas are placed after every word. And in the preface of Volume 2, he wrote, "The commas are an integral and essential part of the medium, regulating the poem's verbal density and time movement, enabling each word to attain a fuller tonal value and the line movement to become more measured." Villa also worked as an associate editor for New Directions Publishing in New York City from 1949 to 1951. And then he became director of poetry workshop at City College of New York from 1952 to 1960. He then left the literary scene and concentrated on teaching, first lecturing in the New School for Social Research from 1964 to 1973, as well as conducting poetry workshops in his apartment. Villa was also a cultural attaché to the Philippine Mission to the United Nations from 1952 to 1963, an advisor on cultural affairs to the President of the Philippines beginning 1968. So here is a partial list of his published books. First is the Philippine Short Stories, one of the best 25 stories of 1928 or 1929. The second was Footnote to Youth Short Stories, year 1933. So, by the way, Footnote to Youth is our story, and we will be discussing this later on. So, the third one was Many Voices Poems, the year 1939. The next one was Poems, year 1941. And then Have Come, I'm Here, Poems, the year 1941. The next one, Selected Poems and New, the year 1942. And the next one, A Dove Gleon Book of Philippine Poetry, the year 1962. So those are the partial list of his published books. So about in his personal life, in 1946, Villa married Rosemary Lamb, with whom he had two sons, Randall and Lance. They annulled 10 years later. He also had three grandchildren, Jordan Villa, Sarah Villa, Stokes, and Travis Villa. So Villa was especially close to his nieces, Ruby Priscilla, Milagros Villanueva, Maria Luisa Cohen, and Maria Villanueva. So let's move on to his awards. The first awards that he had received was through the sponsorship of Conrad Aiken, noted American poet and critic. Villa was granted the Guggenheim Fellowship in Creative Writing. He was also awarded $1,000 for outstanding work in American literature. He won first prize in poetry at the UP Golden Jubilee Literary Contests in the year 1958. He was conferred the degree Doctor of Literature honoris causa by FEU in the year 1959. The Pro Patria Award for Literature, the year 1961. Heritage Awards for Literature for Poetry and Short Stories, the year 1962. National Artist Award for Literature, 1973. On 7th January 1997, Jose Garcia Villa died at a New York hospital. 2 days after, he was found unconscious in his apartment, and he was 88. The Department of Foreign Affairs said Villa, popularly known as the Coma Poet, died at 12:37 a.m. New York time of cerebral stroke and multilobar pneumonia at the St. Vincent Hospital in Greenwich. Interment was scheduled on February 10 in New York, the DFA said. And it added that Villa had expressed the wish to be buried wearing a barong. Though he lived in New York for 67 years, he remained happily a Filipino citizen. Now, let's have first the vocabulary. When you read this short story, you will encounter unfamiliar words, and here are some of those unfamiliar words, and we will understand its meaning. So, the first word is cursorily, meaning accelerated. Smudged, meaning a dirty mark. Vigorously, meaning powerful action. Emerged, meaning rise out. Insolent, meaning disrespectful. Stature meaning standing. Consciousness meaning aware. Fidgeted meaning restless mood. Sourly meaning fermented. Immensely meaning bounded. Climacteric meaning critical period. Queer meaning strange. Querulous meaning habitually complaining. Descended meaning more downward. Resentment meaning angry. Now let's have the literary text. So in the story, it is entitled The Footnote to Youth by Jose Garcia Villa. Allow me to read the short story, and please follow while I read the story. The sun was some on and hazy in the west. Dudong thought to himself he would tell his father about Tiang when he got home. After he had unhitched the carabao from the plow and led it to its shed and fed it, he was hesitant about saying it. He wanted his father to know what he had to say was of serious importance, as it would mark a climacteric in his life. Dudong finally decided to tell it, but a thought came to him that his father might refuse to consider it. His father was a silent, hard-working farmer who chewed areca nut, which he had learned to do from his mother, Dudong's grandmother. He wished as he looked at her that he had a sister who could help his mother in the housework. I will tell him. I will tell it to him. The ground was broken up into many fresh wounds and fragrant with a stewish, earthly smell. Many slender, soft worms emerged from the further rows and then burrowed again deeper into the soil. A short, colorless worm marched blindly to Dudong's foot and crawled clamily over it. Dudong got tickled and jerked his foot, flinging the worm into the air. Dudong did not bother to look where into the air, but thought of his age, 17, and he said to himself, he was not young anymore. So Dodong unhitched the carabao leisurely and gave it a healthy tap on the hip. The beast turned its head to look at him with dumb, faithful eyes. Dudong gave it a slight push and the animal walked alongside him to its shed. He placed bundles of grass before it and the carabao began to eat. Dudong looked at it without interest. Dudong started homeward thinking how he could break his news to his father. He wanted to marry. Dudong did. He was 17. He had pimples on his face, then down on his upper lip was dark. These meant he was no longer a boy. He was growing into a man. He was a man. Dudong felt insolent and big at the thought of it, although he was by nature low in stature. Thinking himself man grown, Dudong felt he could do anything. He walked faster, prodded by the thought of his virility. A small, angled stone bled his foot, but he dismissed it cursorily. He lifted his leg and looked at the hurt too, and then went on walking. In the cool sundown, he thought wild young dreams of himself and Tiang, his girl. She had a small brown face and small black eyes and straight glossy hair. How desirable she was to him. She made him want to touch her, to hold her. She made him dream even during the day. Dodong tensed with desire and looked at the muscle of his arms dirty. This field work was healthy, invigorating, but it begrimed you, smudged you terribly. He turned back the way he had come, then marched obliquely to a creek Must you marry Dudong? Dudong resented his father's question. His father himself had married early. Dudong stripped himself and laid his clothes, a grey undershirt and red condiment shorts on the grass. Then he went into the water, wet his body over and rubbed at it vigorously. He was not long in bathing. Then he marched homeward again. The bath made him feel cool. It was dusk when he reached home. The petroleum lamp on the ceiling was already lighted, and a low unvarnished square table was set for supper. He and his parents sat down on the floor around the table to eat. They had fried freshwater fish and rice, but did not partake of the fruit. The bananas were overripe, and when one held they felt more fluid than solid. Dudung broke off a piece of caked sugar, dipped it in his glass of water, and ate it. He got another piece and wanted some more, but he thought of leaving the remainder for his parent. Dudung's mother removed the dishes when they were through and went with slow, careful steps, and Dudung wanted to help her carry the dishes out. But he was tired and now felt lazy. He wished, as he looked at her, that he had a sister who could help his mother in the housework. He pitied her, doing all the housework alone. His father remained in the room, sucking a diseased tooth. It was paining him again. Dudung knew Dudung had told him often and again to let the town dentist pull it out, but he was afraid. His father was. He did not tell that to Dudung, but Dudung guessed it. Afterward, Dudung himself thought that if he had a decayed tooth, he would be afraid to go to the dentist. He would not be any bolder than his father. Dudung said while his mother was out that he was going to marry Tiang. There it was out, what we had to say, and over which he had said it without any effort at all and without self-consciousness. Dudung felt relieved and looked at his father expectantly. A decrescent moon outside shed its feeble light into the window, graying the still black temples of his father. His father looked old now. "I am going to marry Tiang," Dudung said. His father looked at him silently and stopped sucking the broken tooth. The silence became intense and cruel, and Dudung was uncomfortably and then became very angry because his father kept looking at him without uttering anything. "I will marry Tiang," Dudung repeated. "I will marry Tiang." His father kept gazing at him in flexible silence, and Dudung fidgeted on his seat. "I asked her last night to marry me, and she said, 'Yes, I want your permission. I want it.'" There was an impatient clamor in his voice, an exacting protest at his coldness, this indifference. Dudung looked at his father sourly. He cracked his knuckles one by one, and the little sound it made broke dully the night stillness. "Must you marry Dudung?" Dudung resented his father's question. His father himself had married early. Dudung made a quick, impassioned essay in his mind about selfishness, but later he got confused. "You are very young, Dudung." "I'm 17. That's very young to get married at." I want to marry. Tiang's a good girl." "Tell your mother," his father said. "You tell her, tatay." "Dudong, you tell your inay." "No, you tell her." "All right, Dudong, all right." "You will. Let me marry Tiang." Son, if that is your wish, of course. There was a strange, helpless light in his father's eyes. Dudong did not read it. Too absorbed was he in himself. Dudong was immensely glad he was asserted himself. He lost his resentment for his father. For a while, he even felt sorry for him about the pain in his tooth. Then he confined his mind, dreaming of Tiang and himself. Sweet young dreams. Dudong stood in the sweltering noon heat, sweating profusely so that his camiseta was damp. He was still like a tree and his thoughts were confused. His mother had told him not to leave the house, but he had left. He wanted to get out of it without clear reason at all. He was afraid. He felt afraid of the house. It had seemingly caged him to compress his thoughts with severe tyranny. He was also afraid of Tiang, who was giving birth in the house. She faced screams that chilled his blood. He did not want her to scream like that. He began to wonder madly if the process of childbirth was really painful. Some women, when they gave birth, did not cry. In a few moments, he would be a father. Father, father, he whispered the word with awe, with strangeness. He was young, and he realized now contradicting himself of 9 months ago. He was very young. He felt queer, troubled, and uncomfortable. Dudong felt tired of standing. He sat down on a sawhorse with his feet close together. He looked at his calloused toes. Then he thought, suppose he had 10 children. The journey of thought came to a halt when he heard his mother's voice from the house. Somehow, he was ashamed to his mother of his youthful paternity. It made him feel guilty, as if he had taken something not properly his. Come up, Dudong. It is over. Suddenly, he felt terribly embarrassed as he looked at her. Somehow, he was ashamed to his mother of his youthful paternity. It made him feel guilty, as if he has taken something not properly his. He dropped his eyes and pretended to dust off his condiman shorts. Dudong, his mother called again. Dudong. He turned to look again, and this time he saw his father beside his mother. It is a boy, his father said. He beckoned Dudong to come up. Dudong felt more embarrassed and did not move. His parents' eye seemed to pierce through him, so he felt limp. He wanted to hide or even run away from them. Dudong, you come up. You come up, his mother said. Dudong did not want to come up. He'd rather stayed in the sun. Dudong! Dudong! I'll come up. Dudong traced the tremulous steps of the dry, perched yard. He ascended the bamboo steps slowly, and his heart pounded mercilessly in him. Within, he avoided his parents' eyes. He walked ahead of them so that they should not see his face. He felt guilty and untrue. He felt like crying. His eyes smarted and his chest wanted to burst. He wanted to turn back, to go back to the yard. He wanted somebody to punish him. Son, his mother said. And his mother, Dudong, how kind their voices were. They flowed into him, making him strong. Tiang, Dudong said. She's sleeping, but you'll go in. His father led him into the small sawali room. Dudong saw Tiang, his wife, asleep on the paper with her soft black hair around her face. He did not want her to look that pale. Dudong wanted to touch her, to push away that stray wisp of hair that touched her lips, but again, the feeling of embarrassment came over him. and before his parent, he did not want to be demonstrative. The hill was wrapping the child. Dudong heard him cry. The thin voice touched his heart. He could not control the swelling of happiness in him. "You give him to me, you give him to me," Dudong said. Blas was not Dudong's only child. Many more children came. For 6 successive years, a new child came along. Dudong did not want any more children, but they came. It seemed that the coming of children could not help. Dudong got angry with himself sometimes. Tiang did not complain, but the bearing of children told on her. She was shapeless and thin. Even if she was young, there was interminable work that kept her tied up. Cooking, laundering the house, the children. She cried sometimes, wishing she had no married. She did not tell Dudong this, not wishing him to dislike her. Yet, she wished she had not married, not even Dudong, whom she loved. There had seen another suitor, Losio, older than Dudong by 9 years, and that was why she had chosen Dudong. Young Dudong, who was only 17. Losio had married another. Losio, she wondered, would she have borne him children? Maybe not either. There was a better lot. But she loved Dudong. In the moonlight, tired and querulous, he wanted to ask questions and somebody to answer him. He wanted to be wise about many things. Life did not fulfill all of youth's dream. Why must be so? Why one was forsaken after love? One of them was why life did not fulfill all of the youth's dream. Why it must be so? Why one was forsaken after love? Dudong could not find the answer. Maybe the question was not be answered. It must be so to make youth. Youth must be dreamfully sweet, dreamfully sweet. Dudong returned to the house, humiliated by himself. He had wanted to know little wisdom, but was denied it. When Blas was 18, he came home one night, very flustered and happy. Dudong heard Blas' steps, for he could not sleep well at night. He watched Blas undress in the dark and lie down softly. Blas was restless on his mat and could not sleep. Dudong called his name and asked why he did not sleep. "You better go to sleep." "It is late," Dudong said. Life did not fulfill all of youth's dream. Why it must be so? Why one was forsaken after love? "Itay," Blas called softly. Dudong stared and asked him what it was. I'm going to marry Tona. She accepted me tonight." "Itay, you think it's over?" Dudong lay silent. "I love Tona and I want her." Dudong rose from his mat and told Blas to follow him. They descended to the yard where everything was still and quiet. The moonlight was cold and white. "You want to marry Tona," Dudong said, although he did not want Blas to marry it. Blas was very young. The life that would follow marriage would be hard. "Yes, must you marry?" Blas' voice was stilled with resentment. "I will marry Tona." "You have objection, Itay?" Blas asked acridly. "Son, none, but for Dodong, he'd do anything. Youth must triumph. Now, afterward, it will be life. As long ago, youth and love did triumph for Dudong, and then life." Dudong looked wistfully on his young son in the moonlight. He felt extremely sad and sorry for him. And now let's proceed to the elements of short story. So the setting is in the farm. Characters: Dudong, Tiang, Blas, and Tona. And in the plot, exposition. Dudong was fully decided to marry Tiang and intended to tell it to his father. And in the plot complication, The young regretted to be married at their early age. And in the crisis, Dudong has a question that he can't answer. Why lie forsaken after love? And in the climax, when Blas was at his 18 years of age, he asked permission to his father Dudong to marry Tona. And in denouement, Dodong was helpless. He couldn't do anything but to give his consent. Ending, Dodong was really feel sad and sorry for his son. Now let's have the literary text. So in the story, it is entitled The Footnote to Youth. So the short story Footnote to Youth by Jose Garcia Villa is outstanding and an awakening story for all of us. Diba? Kabaw naman jud tano na. It is the story that can awaken us youth. And as I started reading, I thought I was not going to have any interest at all in the story. However, after I got into the story, I found myself more interested than I thought I was going to be. And this story is an excellent depiction of rash decisions of youth believing that they are correct with the actions that they have done. And it is very realistic and easy to relate for the reason that it reflects to the youth of the past and today's generation. The title itself covers the way for the entire story that it really fits the title in the content and message of the short story, giving advice for both teenagers and parents on how important it is to weigh and balance decisions before we create an action, just like the quotation, "Think before you act," for the youth. And for the parents, it is really important to give advice to their child and not just merely doing nothing and silent, because on their stage is the complex stage where they are still in the process of learning life. The entire story is about the significance of being calm and patient before making life-altering decisions. And while I was reading the story, one question that kept running through my mind was in regard to the depth of information about how the author describes and narrates the life of the character in teenage marriage, emphasizing how they rush in making such decision, believing that they already possess the qualities of being married and believing that they are already capable of being husband to their wife. And based on the story, it shows that there is an overlapping point between two generations, the old traditions and modern society. This conflict is intense because of lack of clear communication and understanding. The story depicts the same between Dudong and his father and later between Dudong and his son Blas. It was maintained at the same level and was passed to other generations since it was not properly discussed and advised by their parents to their child on how important it is not to rush to make decisions. Dudong did not talk nor sermon personally to Blas about what will be the consequences of early marriage rather than enjoying their youth life. By believing in the idea that Blas is now ready for the next step of his life and need to get married, Dudong did not share what he had felt and experienced. Maybe it will not be passed to the next generation. The main point of the old generation of Filipinos who adhere to the traditions and norms is explained both through Dudong's father and later Dudong. It values the institution of marriage and accords it respect. Therefore, the story implies the reality that when we are young, we often lack the maturity and patience to think and balance deeply about our decisions. Such fast actions often end up becoming regrets, which we have to suffer for the rest of our lives. Parents must guide their children in the proper decision making, specifically in teenage marriage, to prevent and cut the cycle of wrong costumes. Hence, the big message of the story is to be patient, reflect, and balance on our choices before making lifelong decisions. So, and the story, nakasabot magid no sa story, and it's all about footnote to youth. So, Jose Villa pass the message to all of us youth, and ganan siya nga makaibaw gid ta bitaw nga ang marriage is not easy. It is a hard and difficult decision gid to make. And the story was very timely kay tungod mo sa nahitabo sa karon nga generation nato. 'Di ba? Katong sa tuwing nahitabo nga si Dodong imbis gi badlong na siya sa iyahang tatay, nahanggid siya nga iya yung ipasiuna gid ang iyang gusto nga iya yung pakaslan no si tiyang. Nya mo to nagminyo gyud sila. Nabot gyud sa time nga nagmahay gyud si Dodong. And confused siya, dagan kay siya question sa iyang mind, no? And questions pa jud nga dili matubag sa iyang kaugalingon. And mausad na nga. And we know no nga we are reminded gyud sa kani nga story. Nga dili gyud ta mag una-una. We must be patient and dapat bisan pa man sa ato ang kanang like pag-uyab-uyab or unsa na dira nga atong gikumitan, dapat makibaw atong parents ana gyud first. Makibaw atong parents para napoy blessing bitaw. And sa story nagkuan gyud siya, teach gyud kanato nga mga youth, sa tanan nga mga youth nga dapat dili gyud nato huna-hunaon ang kalipay kay kalipay nga kanang para lang sa atoa la bitaw kay sa unahan mo regret ra gyud ta ana, magmahay ra gyud ta ana tanan. Dapat kibaw ta muna huna, think before we act. So dapat kibaw gyud ta muna huna before making lifelong decisions. Kibaw ta mo balance atong choices. And above all, we must be patient. Kay God's timing is always best yun. Mas best pa sa ato ang plano. So, let's move on to the theme. The theme is about marriage. So, marriage, the realities and responsibilities of youths that come with marriage and the family life. Marriage is something that is full of responsibilities and that is taken seriously. When you decide to get married and you do marry someone, there is no turning back. To the youth, there is lots of things that should be taken into consideration before marrying. Of course, including their readiness to take the responsibilities of raising a family and being able to respond to their needs. Also, the theme is more universal in the sense that it is a footnote not only to the youth, but also to the parents as well. The quality of one's life is likened to that of a worm when marriage and adulthood is rushed into at a very young age. So, that would be all for my short story. Thank you and may God bless us all.